Am I pronouncing it right?
Severino.
Severino. Severino. Okay, I knew I was going to get it wrong. But Carrie is the mother of 3 children, ages 6, 3, and 1. And in addition to that, she does lots of things, as you'll hear. I'm not even going to list everything that she does, but she's a graduate from Harvard Law School and Duke University, and she has a master's degree in linguistics from Michigan State University. She's currently the Chief Counsel and Policy Director to the Judicial Crisis Network. And in that capacity, she testifies before Congress. She briefs senators, congressmen. She's appeared on television, MSNBC, Fox, CNN, C-SPAN, and the list goes on. So we're so happy to have you with us today, Carrie, and thank you for enlightening us on this issue of the Health and Human Services Mandate. And we're going to really try to keep the discussion and today strictly to this topic. There's lots of things that we could talk about and tap Carrie's mind on, but we're really going to keep it to this issue today. And we ask that we all keep it to that. And if we start to stray, then we'll kind of try to bring it back. But we thought that we would start with a little prayer because this is it's a matter of we have to obviously fight for our religious freedom, but I think we have to be reminded of the peace that goes with that. And there's just something that I'm going to read here that Zita found, and it seemed very appropriate. It says, "The attitude of a child of God is not one of resignation to a possibly tragic fate. It is the sense of achievement of someone who has a foretaste of victory. In the name of this victorious love of Christ, we Christians should go out into the world to be sowers of peace and joy through everything we say and do. We have to fight, a fight of peace, against evil, against injustice, against sin. Thus do we serve, notice that the present condition of mankind is not definitive. Only the love of God shown in the heart of Christ will attain our glorious spiritual triumph." So with that, I'm going to let Carrie take over and share her wisdom. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. That's a wonderful introduction because as important as this issue is, and as much of a turning point, I think, is in many ways in our country, this is still, we know that the church has survived far worse, and that we know that the gates of hell will not prevail against it. So we just need to know what we are being called to do in this time and in this place that God has put us in order to respond to the challenges that we have. I want to start out by talking about the nature of religious freedom in our Constitution and why that is so important, and then move on to how the mandate has been a challenge to that. James Madison, one of the authors of the Constitution, is often quoted as saying, "If men were angels, no government would be necessary." And that is true. We're not angels, and so we need government to help govern us. But his quote actually goes on, and it's very interesting what he continues on to say. He says, if men were to be governed by angels, then no limits on the government would be necessary. We know, however, of course, that our government is not one made of angels, but of men as well. And so he continued on saying, knowing as we do that we are writing a constitution for a government of men over men, there's a competing problem of, first, we have to give enough power to the government in order to control the governed, and then you must compel the government to control itself. And that is really what our challenge is here, and this is why the fact that government is surpassing these limits of religious freedom is so troubling. When our founders drafted our Constitution, they were coming out of a Revolutionary War in which they were very concerned about the inherent tendency of governments to become tyrannical. So they purposely created our government in order to reduce the risks of that kind of tyranny. This is enabling the government to control itself, as James Madison said. And there are 2 types of limits that the founders put into the Constitution. The first one, which is really the primary one, was giving it limited power. So saying there's only certain areas of life that the government even should be engaging in. That we're going to we all already in our duties as individuals. That doesn't come from the government. That comes from God. We're endowed by our Creator, right, with certain rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what our Declaration of Independence says. So we have our rights from our Creator, and we are granting certain of them, the government certain authority in that, in order to govern us, but they certainly don't have plenary authority, and they're not the source of our rights. So in our Constitution, the federal government is given only certain jobs. So, for example, writing treaties with foreign nations, that's their job. Or doing things that have to be of a national nature, whether it's the post office, or having a national law for copyrights and patents, things like that. These are things that have to be done by the national government. One of the list of things the federal government is doing that has to do with regulating interstate commerce. That's actually where the healthcare law has run into the current big litigation we're seeing right now. Is this really part of the limited authority that the government has been granted by the Constitution, or is this taking a step beyond to say we're going to be able to compel you to purchase a product? And so that limit on government is one angle that people are very concerned about this healthcare law. But the truly disturbing part is that now with the HHS mandate, it is trying to surpass, the government is trying to surpass the second type of limits on freedom. So we have the limited power given to the federal government in the first place, and then we have the Bill of Rights. And that is a limit saying, even within the authority the government has, here are some things that you can't do. You know, of course, the First Amendment, the very first freedom is the freedom of religion and the freedom of speech. We have the freedom of assembly. We have the right to bear arms. Going down the whole list. So no matter, even if it's within the government's, delegated tasks, the government can't surpass these freedoms. Well, it's not surprising that when you have a government that, at least from my perspective, is already saying, well, this is a really important national issue. This is something that's very crucial. We need to act here, and not taking the time to be concerned, is this something that's within our constitutional authority, for example, with the healthcare law, that the next step is saying, is not also taking care that it doesn't violate the Bill of Rights, which is our next step of concern. So not only, the government says, not only can we compel you to purchase something, but we can compel you to purchase something that violates your own conscience. And that is the definition of tyranny, saying the government actually has the authority to make you violate your conscience, goes well beyond any just authority given to government. Now, to go back and give a summary of what has been going on with this mandate issue, this comes out of a regulation in the healthcare law that says that certain preventative care services by government-approved plans are going to be covered 100% by the government. So there are certain things that are so important for preventative care, there's not even going to be a copay on them. No one can be charged for these things. They're just going to be automatically included in every single plan. And and that law was passed by Congress saying that much. But Congress, the elected representatives of the American people, didn't actually say what those preventative services were. They delegated that then to the Department of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius' administration within the government. The Department of Health and Human Services, at least, Sebelius was appointed by the president, and so there's some kind of check there. They didn't determine that, actually. They further delegated it to the Institute of Medicine, which I believe is a subsection of the National Institutes of Health. So they're going down, and then they delegated this to a committee. So now we have something that's part of our national law that's going to go into effect throughout the country that has been delegated through 3 or 4 different levels. Now we're down to a committee level, and then this committee was asked just to tell us what the preventative care things that we should mandate should be. They didn't have a mandate to consider what the costs of this were. They didn't have a mandate to consider other things like, does this violate the Constitution in other areas? They specifically said when asked, no, we didn't consider whether religious freedom should play in, because that wasn't part of our goal. And pro-life groups now looking at the composition of this committee have discovered that actually a large number of people in the committee have real clear ties to Planned Parenthood, to abortion groups and things. So it's not surprising that this committee would then have come out with, amongst its list of preventative care things, said contraceptions should be a preventative care that's covered across the board. Now that's problematic on just a whole slew of reasons. First of all, as I'm sure we're all familiar with, pregnancy is not actually a disease. Those of you here who are expecting babies, you're not sick. This is a natural part of life. So to say that preventative procedures or drugs to prevent pregnancy are preventing disease is just a complete skewing of the terms. This is the goal was that things that would then, increase the efficiency of the healthcare system. So, for example, by increasing mammograms so that you can screen people, find it earlier, and not have to pay so much or have so much risk for breast cancer treatment down the road. Things like that. That's preventative. Actually, that's not even preventative care. That's screening. Preventative care might be, getting the drugs early on that will, or even vitamins or something that's going to prevent you from getting a disease in the first place. So, contraception is clearly not part of that. Sterilization, also included, is not part of that. Emergency contraception, abortifacient drugs that you can take even after you've already gotten pregnant, as long as it's before implantation, still counts as contraceptive by the medical community standards at least, and not abortifacient. Those are covered by that. So this is saying that everyone across the board, no one will have to pay for these things. It's interesting because even at a public policy level, it's a strange thing because you have a whole range of drugs and procedures that are included in contraception. If you wanted to contracept, you could get a $9 drug from Walmart, or you could get the Cadillac level drug, or you could just go and have a very expensive surgical process done. By making these all with the same cost, that is zero, it actually encourages people to consume this more, consume contraceptives and consume sterilization procedures more, and it also encourages them not to take the costs into account the same way. So someone who might have just used an oral contraceptive pill now says, hey, as long as I'm in, I'm just going to get my tubes tied, I'm going to use this really expensive name brand pill instead of the generic pill. That's a public policy matter that doesn't make sense necessarily because of the way this was done. So in August, this rule was proposed. The bishops read the rule, were very concerned about the lack of protection for religious freedom in this, and commented about it. Nonetheless, the rule was announced again in January, and this is when the firestorm really started. Everyone says, wait, what is this rule? This is going to force religious groups to purchase contraceptives even if they disagree with it. How can they do this? You even had some Democrats and supporters of the president who were saying this goes too far, particularly because there is no real religious exemption. So the religious exemption in this rule is paper thin. It's modeled on the 3 states in the country that have the most minimum religious exemptions. It's much less than, for example, the religious exemption that President Clinton had proposed in his own health care law. It says basically you only are entitled to religious exemption if you are you're an institution where your primary goal is inculcating religious beliefs. So you're a church, you're a religious education institution. You primarily employ and you primarily serve only people of your religious group. So that it works fine for the Amish, and that works fine for groups who actually believe in only serving their own religious group. But as a matter of principle, Catholics do not believe that. So it doesn't include Catholics in terms of their schools, in terms of their charity work that we do. People have commented it doesn't even really cover Jesus. He healed the Samaritan. He spoke to all these people who were outside his own religious group. It's frightening when you have a definition of religious group that doesn't include Jesus himself, doesn't include Mother Teresa. You get the idea. So after this firestorm, we see the president then in February stating, "Oh well, don't worry, we'll make an accommodation. Trust me, we'll make this work so that it doesn't violate religious freedom." Well, what actually happened there, and then you saw a lot of the people backed out, particularly the ones who were historically had been supporters both of the healthcare law and of the president. So the Catholic Medical Association, the same thing should be there for religion, where if there's a neutral law, and as long as it's not undermining the state, undermining the government, we need to have an exception. Obviously, if someone believes in human sacrifice, they're fundamentally deep in other religious beliefs, I'm sorry, that is going to fundamentally undermine the state. Not paying for contraceptives is a totally different scenario. St. Thomas